So what's the free banker response on this point? Okay, so, and this is neat. So even if you don't care about this stuff per se, if you're especially like a grad student and you know you're not doing this stuff for your dissertation, I would recommend reading enough of this debate to at least see what Selgin says, like in some of his longer pieces on this. So like his book-length treatment on free banking, where he directly addresses this. So to their credit, they don't just dodge this question, and it's a pretty nuanced issue. And so the reason I'm saying you should read it, not because you care so much about fractional reserve banking, but because thinking through what his position is, it does force you to really sit back and just like, how does an economy work? How does the credit market work? And what happens when loans are made and there's credit, and investments and saving, and what's the definition of saving? And it gets into some really interesting thought experiments. Like when I was preparing for the debate and I was reading Selgin's position, which ended up being more nuanced than I had expected, I really was like pacing around my apartment till 2 a.m. Like, wait a minute, I'm picturing guys making loans of fish and stuff, and it was great. So if you don't want to do that, then don't read this stuff, because it occurred to me that some of you might think, that sounds horrible. I'd rather hibernate for 3 months. All right, so what Selgin says is, so he agrees. He says, yes, there's two distinct things going on. We, the free bankers, can lay out the conditions for equilibrium, so the profit maximizing amount of fractional reserves that a commercial bank will engage in if there's no external regulation. Okay, so they have one train of thought to say, take any particular commercial bank in a system of what they call free banking, and then what would its reserve ratio be? It wouldn't be 0%, because then if any customer showed up ever and wanted to take his money out, the bank would go out of business, right? The word would spread in the community, they don't have our money, and they would be done for. On the other hand, Selgin says, it wouldn't be 100% reserves. That's too safe. The bank could, have 99% reserves and make more profit than at 100% reserves. And yeah, there's a slight chance there could be a bank run, and they would run out if they only have 99% of the, checking accounts stored as cash in the vault. But come on, what are the chances of that happening? And so they're saying when the bank optimally picks its reserve ratio, balancing the risks of a bank run and running out versus the extra profit from making more loans. Because the banks, the more they lend out, why does a bank want to engage in fractional reserve banking? Because they make more money, right? If they take a ticket and lend it out and say you owe us 1.05 of these tickets next year, that 0.05 is pure profit to them, or is pure income to them, free and clear. They can destroy that ticket, and so now that claim, that excess claim on the cash in the vault is gone, but the 0.05 in interest that they earn is theirs, free and clear. It's not that, they got to be careful with that. So they're earning legitimate net, well, I don't say legit, they are earning income in terms of the accounting once you just overlook the weirdness of it. And so that's why they would do it. Okay, but again, there's a risk. The more they do it, the riskier. And so there's like a game theoretic treatment that Selgin and White can engage in, and they have it published, in mathematical journals talking about this stuff. What's the optimum thing, and what's the Nash equilibrium? Blah 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 blah. Okay, and then he says there's another sense of equilibrium in which the voluntary savings of the community corresponds to the amount borrowed and invested, and that's a different notion of equilibrium. And he says, but it just so happens the two are always going to line up, at least in a free banking regime, where the government policies are what we say. And he says that, I can't reproduce it here because it's too complex, but he's saying that when somebody in the community wants to, on net, accumulate more claim tickets issued by the bank, that person's saving, right? Because he's earning income, he could go spend it, but instead he wants to accumulate tickets. That's an asset, so he's engaging in savings. And that's the only time when it would be profitable for a bank to issue more of those tickets, when on net the community wants to hold more, and hence the banks engage in monetary inflation precisely when people in the community want to save more. So they're saying, see, that they're claiming that keeps interest rates where they should be, that it would arbitrarily make interest rates go artificially high if we insisted on 100% reserves, because then people are scrambling to hold more of these tickets because they want to hold more money for some reason, and then they can't, and so then you have to wait for prices to fall, and there's this painful, sluggish adjustment process. Okay, so that's where they're coming from. They would also point to historical examples of what I'll say is close to free banking. For example, Scotland and Canada during the specified years, and they'll say, and these were remarkably stable. Okay, so they got a two-pronged thing. They're going to do the theoretical treatment, which I can't get into. I actually have some articles under review right now But it's more of a technical argument where I think they're wrong when they say that first point I mentioned, but I'm just saying it is a subtle point. It's interesting to consider. The second point, I think, is very weak. So they also appeal to history. And they come, if you've seen the debate that I did with Selgin, let's just say he's not a very timid man, okay? And so he has these sweeping things, and it sounds like, he's obviously done much more research on this. This is his baby. This is his area. And so he'll make sweeping statements like, oh, Scotland during these years of the free banking era was remarkably stable. And the same thing, Canada in the late 1800s when they switched over was very unregulated and open entry and remarkably stable. Okay, so for Scotland, Rothbard points out, for example, there were a period more than a decade long when the banks suspended specie redemption. Right? They just said, no, you can't turn in the tickets for gold. So that's kind of awkward. That's not what free banking is supposed to be. It's supposed to be they run the risk. If they inflate too much and they can't redeem it, then they're done. They got away with doing it for more than a decade, and so clearly there's something going on there where that wasn't free banking. So that's one thing, and it's kind of weird that it takes the Rothbardians to pry that out of the free bankers when they should be announcing that up front and center. As far as Canada, this is the last point I'll end on here. So Selgin pointed to this book, The Canadian Banking System, so this guy wrote this in 1895, this expert on Canadian banking, and Selgin was saying this is the authoritative treatment, shows that banking in the late 1800s, what George Selgin, would say is one of the best examples of free banking we have in world history, and it was remarkably stable. So I'm looking through the table of contents. I hope you guys can see this. This is the last point I'll mention. So I'm looking through the table of contents to see this remarkable stability, how this is a challenge to the Rothbardian position. And the chapter on this says, banking under the Confederation, 1867 to 89. First one, the expansion, depression, 1874 to 1879. Bank failures and losses. This could have been Rothbard's thesis, right? Like he could have done this instead of the other bank panics. So I think here, again, part of it is they're talking past each other. What George means, if you read through it, is this author actually is proud of the performance, and he says most depositors got their money back, right? And so he's saying not too many people lost their money outright, and so that's why Selgin thinks, look at this thing came through, because in George's mind, we always have business cycles, but look at, not too many people lost their money, this is remarkably stable. Okay, whereas the Rothbardians are saying, this is exactly what we said would happen. How is this a refutation of our position? Okay, thanks everybody.